I want to quote David Daniell one more time, talking about the legacy of William Tyndale. And this is from his book, The Bible in English, Its History and Influence. He says, Tyndale was in the vanguard of the popular English Reformation. His books, especially Wicked Mammon, Obedience of a Christian Man, and his expositions of Romans, gathered to a head the widespread revulsion at the corruptions and superstitions of the church, as it then was, all of which are clearly described. Scripture had to be the base for those judgments. And it was spelled out with clarity and excellent scholarship from the original languages. From the great release that justification by faith brings to the sinner, Tyndale showed, always in the language of the New Testament, that central to the Christian's life were not curious rituals and practices, but the promises of God. He was passionate in his wish that Britain could be a Christian state under a Christian prince, free from the intrusions of a totally alien system stemming from the Bishop of Rome. Tyndale was a true revolutionary in his political as well as his theological thinking. His courage was great. In opposing the Roman Church, he was confronting the greatest power in the Western world. Daniell writes, the great change that came over England from 1526, the ability of every ordinary man, woman, and child to read and hear the whole New Testament in English, accurately rendered, was Tyndale's work. And its importance cannot be overemphasized. The Vulgate was incomprehensible to the plowboy and most of his familiars throughout the land. What the priests let the people know was a fraction of the whole Bible. Now all four of the Gospels, for example, could be read in their entirety, and the whole of Paul. There was no shortage of evidence of the gatherings of people of all ages all over the country to read and hear these English scriptures. And reading meant so often reading aloud. Tyndale, as the first translator of Hebrew into English, stands up well to informed scrutiny. His understanding of New Testament theology and how it related to the Old Testament pointed forward. He left Luther behind. His fresh appraisals from the Greek effectively liberated New Testament theology in the English, allowing the possibility of reinterpretations in every generation, as had clearly happened in the life of the early church, and could and did happen again in Britain and America. In the last 100 years, Tyndale has been judged supreme in accuracy and in aesthetics. Understanding is growing, however, that what a translator like Tyndale believed he was doing went more importantly into other courts. To change the metaphor, lurking in the scripture landscape of his time lay the monsters of ideology, authority, and power. It is the interplay of political, spiritual, epistemological, and rhetorical authorities that marks early modern arguments over vernacular scripture. Authority, meaning only credibility, was no longer enough. The English Reformation gave new political power, causing urgent debate about what that was and who had the right to wield it. To Henry VIII, in his proclamation of 22nd June 1530, prohibiting the use of translations, Tyndale had produced pestiferous English books printed in other regions to pervert the people, to stir and incense them to sedition. Refuting that common charge years before, Tyndale, in his obedience, based his claim of the political role of vernacular scripture on its evident power to maintain God's proper ordering of things, and that the Christian life means obedience to the king, not the pope. His point is repeatedly made. Rome is afraid of scripture, which will pull down papal authority. So the Bible in English is not only a source of doctrine, a text for exegesis, it is itself an agent of the greatest change in national as well as personal life. Tyndale's gift to the English language is immeasurable. He translated into a register just above common speech, allied in its clarity to Proverbs. It is a language which still speaks directly to the heart. His rhetorical aims were always accuracy and clarity. King James's revisers adopted his style and his words for a good deal of their version. At a time when European scholars and professionals communicated in Latin, Tyndale insisted on being understood by ordinary people. He preferred a simple Saxon syntax of subject, verb, object. His vocabulary is predominantly Saxon and often monosyllabic. An Oxford scholar, he was always rhetorically alert. He gave the Bible reading nation an English plain style. It is a basis for the great Elizabethan writers, and will be seen there is truth in the remark, without Tyndale, no Shakespeare. It is not fanciful to see a chief agent of the energizing of the language in the 16th century, the constant reading of the Bible in English, of which Tyndale was the great maker.